Earlier this week, we released a report on the expert panel that I appointed into the civil unrest in July last year. The report paints a deeply disturbing picture of the capabilities of our security services and the structures that exist to coordinate their work. The report concludes that government's initial handling of the July 2021 event was inept, police operational planning was poor, there was poor coordination between the state security and intelligence services, and police are not always embedded in the communities that they serve.
Live from the SABC's Auckland Park studios in Johannesburg, a very good evening to you and welcome to this evening's edition of Unfiltered. I'm Peter Ndora, standing in for Aldrin Sampear. Now, during the Sonar address last week, you've just heard President Ramaphosa announcing the recruitment of 12,000 new police personnel and the re-establishment of community policing forums, amongst others. Now, this comes after the expert panel tasked with investigating last year's civil unrest in July released its report last week. And the report painted a pretty bleak picture about police and state security. The President said that the National Security Council had tasked the security services with implementing the panel's recommendations. Well, tonight we ask, are the police losing the fight against crime? Our guests on the program, Dr. Johan Burger, who's a consultant with the Institute for Security Studies in the Justice and Violence Prevention Program, and also Mpho Kwinika, who's a General Secretary of the Independent Policing Union of South Africa. We'll be chatting to them just now, but don't forget, you can join in on this discussion online using the handle @Unfiltered SABC. That's on Twitter, and Unfiltered SABC to find us on our Facebook page. We look forward to hearing from you on this very critical issue. But let's get straight into this discussion. As I say, a very good evening to my guests. Thank you so much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program. Perhaps I can start with you, General Secretary. The President was quite scathing about the police and essentially said that you let us down because you were ill-prepared and didn't do your job. Do you agree?
The President was honest. I think he had shared with South Africans what pains him and the country. And that statement has made South Africans to feel that the President is doing something about the ineptness of our police in this country.
But do you agree the police let us down?
They did. Look, the police have always been letting South Africans down. We have raised these issues openly. We are very critical about the role of policing in this country. And we will continue to do this. And I think the President just confirmed what we said when General Stolle was appointed in 2017. And then we said, if the general is appointed in this position, the ramifications of him not being the suitable person for that job are going to be seen or felt by South Africans 3 to 4 years to come. And I think it is this 4th year that this thing has happened, and South Africans have felt that pain.
All right. Dr. Johan Burger, thanks very much indeed for joining us. What are your thoughts when you saw that report? I'm thinking that not much surprised you.
Good evening, Peter. Yeah, absolutely true. You know, and even more astonishing is the fact that we've had a number of reports over the last number of years. You may recall the National Development Plan in 2012, approved by Cabinet and by Parliament, and with a number of very, very practical recommendations about how the police can be strengthened, improved, made more professional, and so on. And to my knowledge, none of those recommendations were ever implemented. Talking about 9 years. Since then, there's been other reports. There's been the Marikana report, the Kailicha Commission report. There's been the panel of experts report in 2018. And now there's been all these more recent reports. And one cannot help but wonder whether anything will now be implemented. Hopefully, the president sounds serious enough. He sounds like he has now committed himself to reforming the security services, intelligence, and the other security services. So I'm still skeptical, but I am very hopeful that we will see some of these recommendations now being implemented.
All right, so what then has been holding us back? You say the reports have been there, but there's been no implementation. Has it been because they don't know how to implement or they don't want to? What's your feeling?
Yes, I think, Peter, you are absolutely right. You know, I got the impression that some of those recommendations were perhaps politically difficult to accept. For example, one of the primary recommendations, both in the National Development Plan as well as in the report by the panel of experts, is about the appointment of the leadership of the police. Now, if we just think about this for a moment, the current problems of the police has largely to do with the leadership crisis within the police service. Now, I think it's the recommendations is a radical departure from what the Constitution provides. For the Constitution, in section, I think 206 of the Constitution says that the president can appoint any man or woman as commissioner, national commissioner of the South African Police Service. He does not have to consult anybody. There are no requirements, criteria. It simply says you can appoint any man or woman. And what the recommendations now say is there needs to be a process. There needs to be a panel that can scrutinize applications for these positions, and it includes deputy national commissioners, obviously, and that the panel then, from the shortlist they compile, can make a recommendation to the president as to which of these candidates he or she should be appointing. So that's a radical shift from the current situation, constitutional situation. And I think government currently finds it difficult. They don't seem to have the appetite for this change. Although the president created precedents for this when he appointed the head of the National Prosecuting Authority, the head of SARS, and certainly I can't see that he needs to do anything different when it comes to appointing the National Commissioner of Police.
General Secretary, I just wonder, you sort of gave us a hint a little bit earlier on as to what Dr. Berger was talking about in terms of leadership. Do you think that a lot of the problems are because of who's in charge?
Yes. This is a command and control environment where leadership in the police have to be respected for the decisions they make and for the role that they play in leading the institution. So if you have got a weak leadership, you're going to have a limping organization. And I think the problem which we have seen, these political issues that are panning out in policing, the National Commissioner of Police owes it, the current one and the previous one, they owed it to a politician for them having been appointed where they are. So would you find a National Commissioner of Police who's going to go against what politicians, those people who have appointed them, telling them not to do what they want to do? It is highly unlikely that that can happen. So we need to depoliticize the police and make sure that professional police officer, National Commissioner of Police is appointed in terms of the National Development Plan Vision 2030, which Professor Berger was talking to. And he is correct to say that we should not look at the appointment of the National Commission of Police different from the other heads of other departments. We need to follow that, and that is the best way of getting and even identifying a professional lead of the South African Police Service.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll continue to explore what can be done. The President has announced 12,000 police officers to be recruited, but will that make a difference? We'll find out from our panel of experts. But don't forget, you too at home can be part of this conversation. Please share your thoughts and your messages with us on social media. All of this still to come. You're watching Unfiltered.
Deputy Speaker, allow me to reiterate and reaffirm our strong position as a security cluster without fear or contradiction that there is no threat to the stability of the country. I repeat, there is no threat in the stability of the country. Yes, there will be elements that here and there will be time of limping, but overall, the country is in safe hands. The President stood here on the nation last week telling us about the damning blows recently suffered by the country. Could they have been prevented? Some of them. Could they have been worse? Certainly. Could those tasked with safeguarding this country done better? Of course, yes and no. Before we can fully appreciate how we got here, let us look back where it started. Systematic and deliberate erosion of the country's security apparatus over the years last brought us to this point. Mopping out a mess that deliberately created to weaken the country's security agencies and law enforcement will take some time to clean up, but rest assured, the work started and the work will be done.
So that's the police minister trying to convince the members of parliament there that things could have been worse, but they did a lot to mitigate some of the things that went on. Not everybody believes them, but 12,000 police officers are going to be recruited. Let's find out from our panel of experts whether that's going to make a difference. Dr. Berger, thanks very much indeed again for joining us. 12,000 extra policemen. Is it a question of resources, or could it also be a question of inefficiency? And if that's the case, that means it doesn't matter how many people you put out there, you're still going to get the same results.
Yeah, Peter, let me just say up front, I need to say this. I want to salute the many thousands of dedicated, hardworking and honest police officers who are out there, and we owe them a lot of gratitude for some of the successes the police still managed to achieve against all of these difficulties that we continue to talk about. But you're also right. I think it's a combination of both. I think efficiency or lack of efficiency in terms of the available resources has to take a lot of the blame for some of the difficulties that the police currently experience. But on the other hand, also in the last 3 or 4 years, the police numbers dropped from something like 152,000 to 144,000. So the police have been under pressure for quite a long time. I think, at 152,000, they just managed to achieve a sort of acceptable public police ratio of 1 to 400. But that gap is now much bigger because of the numbers they lost. And of course, for 2 years in a row, they were unable to recruit and train anybody. But, one of the other recommendations in the National Development Plan and also the panel of expert support, because you have to read the 2 reports together, is that there needs to be a process, an evaluation process of all officers in the police service to determine to what extent are they fit and proper for the positions that they hold. Because some of them have been appointed to those positions under circumstances that are questionable, and that needs to be corrected. So Mr. Kunika is correct when he says that there is a huge problem with command and control in the police service. And that also explains a lot of the other problems. Accountability, for example, if you look at the police's performance in Parliament when they presented their disciplinary results, it is, dismal. Which means that I think just about 7% of all police officers charged in terms of the disciplinary code face any penalties. And that means that there is no real accountability, there's no deterrence, there are no consequences for police officers who are guilty of misconduct. So there needs to be a serious overall, if not a complete reform of the police service. It can be done, but what is now required is political will. And I think, we mentioned all of these reports, but I got the sense from the president that he is now at a point where he understands that drastic interventions are now necessary, are now in fact crucial if we want to save this country.
All right, drastic measures required. General Secretary Kunika, 12,000 policemen on the ground. That sounds like a lot, and it may help quite a bit as well. But I suppose part of this is not just numbers, but quality of police officers. I remember the former police minister, Fikile Mbalula, once saying that a lot of people join the police because they can't get a job anywhere else. So I suppose it's not just numbers, but you've got to train these people, and they've got to be quality candidates and officers.
Look, I think police work is a calling. It's not a job. It's a calling. When people who come to this profession should not come here and for luxurious purposes. They should come here knowing that they are coming to do a very difficult job. The issue of 12,000, every year South African Police Service loses about 5,000 police officers through normal attrition, resignation, transfer out, and many other reasons. So if you were to times 5,000 by 3 years, you will see that they have since lost plus minus 15,000. If you bring in 12,000 police officers, you are already running short of 3,000. And not only that, I think it's even more. If you look at the issues which happened with the public order policing. Public order policing, they are still lacking somewhere between 6,000 and 7,000. For South Africans to be properly policed by public order policing, you will need at least 15,000 to 16,000. They are still looking for more numbers to come and complement those people. And the president hinted a bit to say we need public order policing, and I think he was trying to respond to the issues of the poor policing of crowd controls and all these things here in our country. So it is not, the 12,000 is not sufficient, but police officers are trained. They are trained to live with what they have. They are trained to do the best with what they have at their disposal. If you look at the ALU, it's a plant that tells you that it will survive even if there is not water on top, because of the root that it has, which is called a tap root. It will go deep and go and look for water wherever the water is. The police service needs good management. The police service needs good leadership. The people will be able to provide support to those men and women in blue. Professor Berger, you're right to say those people, those members on the ground there, they are doing excellent work, but they need people to command them. They need people to lead them. What we saw in July, that tells you that there wasn't no leadership at all.
All right, we're going to take another break, and when we come back, we'll start to wrap things up a little bit, talk about the future maybe. But so far, it's not been a great picture that's been painted. And if memory serves me correct, since 1994, I think there's only been one police commissioner who left without a cloud over his head or his shoulder, and that was George Fivers. Everybody else since 1994, there's been some drama. So leadership, clearly an issue within the police. But please don't forget, you can join us on social media at Unfiltered SABC on Twitter and at Unfiltered SABC on Facebook. What are your thoughts? What is your experience of our police? Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching Unfiltered on S3, and we're taking a look today at the state of our police. The July report on the unrest last year pretty much painted a picture of a failure in our security agencies, and the President has promised to get something done about that. Well, let's talk a little bit more to our panel of experts. So we have Johan Burger and Mpho to help us unpack this issue further. Let me start with you, General Secretary Quinika. As we look forwards, community policing, is that something that we can deploy and employ? My fear often with some of these things is the communities that have much are the ones that are able to protect themselves more. They essentially start privatizing things like policing, and then the poorer communities get left behind.
Look, it is to police an autocratic state is very easy, but to police a democratic state, it's very, very difficult and expensive. Constitutional democracy requires of communities to participate in policing. Communities need to tell the police what kind of policing they want. So through community policing forum, communities are able to realize that objective. But currently what we've seen is that the communities look at CPF structures as a political structure. They think CPF belongs to the ANC. And if you are coming from the IFP or you're coming from DA, you don't want to participate in those activities. But we are saying as an independent policing union of South Africa that CPF structure is there to make sure that the needs of the societies, when it comes to policing, they are best articulated in that environment and even channeled through policing, so that the end result is that we have got a community-driven kind of police in our country. So CPF structure plays a very integral role in making sure that the safety of our people is well looked after.
Dr. Burger, as we start to wrap up, you know, there's often what they call low-hanging fruit, things that you can do now and quickly that can be quite significant in their change. What are those things in terms of policing in South Africa? Well,
you know, there may be a number of things I think that can be done relatively quickly. The one is, of course, the position of the National Commissioner. Now, all due respect to the National Commissioner, he's been clouded in controversy over the last few years. The President already indicated to him in writing that he is considering his suspension, which means that a board of inquiry will have to be appointed. If the board of inquiry recommends that he be removed from his position, a new national commissioner will have to be appointed. I think this is a good opportunity then for the president to do what he did in some of these other institutions and follow a panel approach and get the best man or woman for that position. And, you know, the advantage of that is that that individual is then appointed, as Mpho correctly said, would be far more independent, because he or she would be the product of a fair process. And that would also improve his or her legitimacy within the police service and outside the police service. So a lot of advantages there. He or she then will hopefully then appoint deputies that would fit the requirements for those positions. So that is, I think, one important area. The other one is the process of assessing senior officers or officers in general. I think one could start with the highest ranking officers, but you need to have a panel that comprises of
Dr.
independent
Berger,
minds as well.
unfortunately we've run out of time, but I think we got an idea of what you were going to say there. But thank you so much indeed for joining us. Dr. Johan Berger, security expert, Institute for Security Studies, General Secretary of the Independent Policing Union of South Africa, Mr. Mpho Kwinika, thank you very much indeed. Those are my guests. I hope you've enjoyed listening to this conversation about the state of our police and some of the things that can be done. The President has promised better and more. We shall have to wait and see. But for me and the Unfiltered team right here on S3, good night.